A guy named Marcus, 34, pulling into his driveway in suburban Dallas. After a 10-hour shift, he kills the engine on his pickup. He grabs his phone and opens his banking app. The number staring back at him is $387. That's what's left after the truck note, insurance, and a tank of gas. A tank of gas that barely lasted the week. Marcus earns $75,000 a year, so he should be comfortable. Instead, he's sitting in a vehicle worth more than his annual take-home pay, wondering how he's going to cover his daughter's dental bill. And Marcus isn't unusual, he's the norm. The owners will tell you it was a practical decision. They'll say they need it for projects, or just in case. They'll mention that one time they helped a buddy move a couch. That single couch ride cost them about $140,000 over the loan. When you stack interest, insurance, fuel, and depreciation together, that's one expensive couch. You think you bought a truck, but you bought a monthly subscription to looking capable. This is where everything you believed about this purchase falls apart. Because the truck in your driveway isn't a tool, it's a costume. And the people who designed it knew exactly what they were stitching. 30 years ago, a pickup was a vinyl-seated, rubber-floored box. A box that smelled like diesel and dog hair. Contractors bought them, ranchers bought them. The average price landed around $15,000, right in line with every other vehicle. Nobody financed a truck for 6 years because nobody needed to. It was a tool, priced like a tool, driven like a tool. Then manufacturers discovered something that changed the entire game. Americans don't just drive trucks, they identify with them. The truck isn't transportation, it's a declaration of being capable and self-reliant. The kind of person who could build a deck or pull a horse trailer. Even if you have never touched either, that emotional wiring runs deep, worth a fortune to anyone willing to exploit it. So they wrapped luxury sedans in truck bodies. Heated and cooled leather, massage seats, panoramic sunroofs, 14-speaker audio, screens wider than your laptop. The Ford F-150 Limited now opens above $75,000. The Sierra Denali Ultimate sits in the same territory. Ram's top trims compete dollar for dollar. The average transaction price for a new pickup has blown past $58,000. And loaded models regularly crack $80,000. You're not buying a truck at that price. You're buying a German luxury car that happens to have a bed you'll never scratch. But here's the reversal that really stings. The person writing that $1,500 check every month believes they made the smart choice. They'll cite resale value and mention towing capacity they've never once tested. They'll talk about how trucks hold their value, while ignoring the $57,000 financed at 7% interest, quietly bleeding them over 72 months. They emptied their savings for a $5,000 down payment and called it responsible. The dealer smiled, shook their hand, and watched them roll off the lot. Inside a financial trap dressed up as freedom. Car dealers are friendly, but they are definitely not your friend. This is the lie at the foundation. Not that trucks are bad machines, they're extraordinary. The lie is that buying one at this price makes you practical. The lie is that the monthly payment is manageable. The lie is that you need it, because the moment you sign that 6-year note, you haven't purchased capability. You've locked yourself into years of mandatory paychecks, chained to a depreciating asset that sits in your driveway doing absolutely nothing. And once you see the real math behind what this decision costs across a lifetime, the numbers stop being uncomfortable and start being violent. 6 years from now, the owner of that truck walks away with roughly $30,000 in resale value. Sounds reasonable until you hold it up against what actually left their bank account. $70,000 in payments, $5,000 down on signing day, $75,000 total, poured into a machine that returned less than half. The gap of $45,000 didn't build equity, it didn't compound. It evaporated into depreciation, interest, and the privilege of parking something shiny. That works out to $625 every single month, quietly vanishing. Not into rent, not into groceries, not into anything that keeps you alive. It just vanishes into nothing. Take that same $625 a month and drop it into a basic index fund returning 8% annually. Over 6 years, that pile grows to approximately $57,000. The real price tag on this truck was never $45,000 in direct losses. It was $45,000 plus $57,000 in wealth. Wealth that simply never got the chance to exist. Over $100,000, either burned or strangled in the crib, for a vehicle that hauled nothing heavier than a gym bag and a case of beer on the 4th of July. Now rewind to the moment this all started. A person earning $75,000 a year sits across from a finance manager. After taxes and standard deductions, their monthly take-home lands around $4,800. The truck's sticker demands a 72-month loan, just to keep the payment from looking absurd. Even stretched across 6 years, the note alone runs $975 a month. But that number is a lie of omission. Nobody drives a truck on payments alone. Insurance on a full-size pickup averages $2,400 a year. That is another $200 a month. Registration and state fees, averaged out, add $50. Fuel for a vehicle getting 14 miles per gallon doesn't sip, it gulps. At $3.80 a gallon, it runs about $340 monthly. That is based on 15,000 annual miles. Stack it all, and the real monthly cost crosses $1,565. So picture the owner 3 years in. They're not thinking about index funds or opportunity cost. They're thinking about the toll on the way to work, and whether they can skip lunch twice this week. They're watching their neighbor pull in with an even bigger rig. A Denali maybe, or a Platinum trim. And assuming that guy must be doing fine. He's not, he's running the same math on a worse ratio. Projecting confidence from behind tinted windows, while his savings account reads $400. This is how the illusion holds. Everyone on the block is performing solvency for everyone else. Nobody admits the truck payment triggered a fight last Tuesday. Nobody mentions the retirement contribution they paused 6 months ago, and they never restarted it. The consensus feels like validation. If everyone's doing it, it can't be that bad. But consensus built on silence isn't proof of anything except shared denial. Underneath all of it, there's a quieter mechanism doing the real damage. The truck doesn't feel like a luxury, it feels like identity. The guy who's never hitched a trailer in his life still feels something shift when he steps down from that cab. Something a Camry never gave him. The ads did their work. Mountains conquered, rivers crossed, impossible loads hauled through mud. And now those images live rent-free in his self-image. He's not overspending on transportation, he's investing in who he believes he is. Readiness, capability, the kind of man who could handle anything, even if anything never actually shows up. Studies show most truck owners use the bed fewer than a dozen times a year. Many go months without placing a single object back there. The capability is theoretical, the payments are not. If someone handed you a receipt showing you'd spent over $100,000 on a tool you use 12 times a year, you'd call that insane. But wrap it in chrome and a leather interior, and suddenly it's just what people drive around here. And that's exactly the gap the dealership is counting on. When they sit you down and ask one very carefully chosen question. Not how much truck you can actually afford, but what monthly number feels comfortable enough to say yes to. Picture someone sitting in a dealership finance office. For the 3rd time in 6 years. They're not there because they want a new truck. They're there because they owe $20,000 more than their current truck is worth. And the only way out that doesn't involve writing a check they don't have is to sign for something even more expensive. The finance manager slides a fresh contract across the desk. The monthly payment barely changes. It feels like a solution. It is the exact opposite. But to understand how someone ends up pinned to that chair, you have to understand something most people never examine. In every vehicle transaction, there are 3 parties collecting wealth, and the person holding the keys isn't one of them. The dealership takes its margin on the sale. The lender collects interest over the life of the loan. The insurance company bills monthly for the privilege of protecting an asset that belongs, on paper, mostly to the bank. The buyer gets a payment book and a set of keys to something that loses value every single month they own it. That is the ownership structure nobody reads out loud at the signing table. And 7 years is not an exaggeration. To squeeze a $65,000 truck inside a $600 monthly budget, the loan stretches to 84 months. The payment lands at $598 and feels manageable. The $15,000 in interest buried inside that term doesn't feel like anything, because it arrives in invisible increments, folded into a number you've already mentally accepted. For most of that loan, you owe more than the truck could sell for. You are, in the language of lending, underwater. Not because something went wrong, because the math was designed that way from the start. Now layer on what happens after the purchase. The factory wheels don't look aggressive enough, so you spend $3,000 on replacements. The stock ride height feels too tame, so a lift kit goes on for $5,000. A tonneau cover for a bed that has never once carried a real payload. It runs you another $1,200. Tinting, exhaust, running boards, LED bed lighting. Within 2 years, somewhere between $5,000 and $15,000 goes into cosmetic modifications. Here is what nobody mentions at the parts counter. Those upgrades add almost nothing to resale value. You are not improving an asset. You are decorating collateral that the bank still holds the majority stake in. Every bolt-on accessory deepens your emotional attachment to a vehicle you cannot afford to keep and now cannot afford to sell. Because walking away means absorbing the loss on every modification you made, with money you no longer have. This is where the system reveals who it was actually built for. The person carrying $6,000 in negative equity doesn't walk into the dealership looking for a more expensive truck. They walk in looking for relief. But the only deal that works mathematically is one where that $6,000 gets rolled into a bigger loan on a much pricier vehicle. A $62,000 truck you couldn't sustain becomes a $70,000 truck you definitely cannot sustain. Except the monthly number stays roughly the same, so it passes the only test most buyers ever apply. The lender writes a fresh loan and collects fresh interest. The dealership books another sale and earns another margin. The buyer resets the clock, now $6,000 deeper from day one. Repeat this cycle twice, and you are staring at $15,000 to $20,000 in negative equity with no exit. That doesn't require cash you have already sent to someone else. Every solution offered to you is another harvest. Now hold that picture and meet two families living on the same street. Both pull in $130,000 a year. Same neighborhood, same number of kids, same grocery runs on Sunday afternoon. The first family parks a loaded pickup and a luxury 3-row SUV in their driveway, $95,000 worth of metal between them, before they have paid a single utility bill. Their combined vehicle costs consume the largest discretionary slice of their income. The payments, the insurance, the fuel, every dollar they earn passes through their hands and lands in the accounts of lenders, insurers, and fuel companies. They work full-time to service machines that sit idle in the driveway, 22 hours a day. The second family, the one you will hear about next, made a very different choice with the exact same paycheck. But before we get there, sit with this for a moment. The truck payment, the mortgage, the second car, the student loans. $975 plus $2,200 plus $450 plus $380. Every dollar allocated before it arrives. That is not a budget, that is a conveyor belt, moving your income directly into institutional accounts. And you are the one who assembled it, one comfortable monthly payment at a time. So tell me honestly in the comments, at what point did you realize, or have you realized yet, that the monthly payment was never designed to show you what you could afford? Only what you would agree to? There's a man named Derek, 41, living outside Charlotte, pulling in about $78,000 a year. He's standing in his driveway at 6:14 on a Tuesday morning, travel mug in one hand, phone in the other, staring at a retirement calculator he found at 2 a.m. when he couldn't sleep. The number says he's $437,000 behind where he should be. He doesn't understand how. He doesn't gamble. He packs lunch 3 days a week. But there it is.